sometimes get it correct when they look at NASA and analyze where that money's going and what they're claiming to do with it. They may not have the big picture, but they can see how the environment is used as this ubiquitous eternal victim to be advocated on behalf of with state power. Environmentalism has always been communism, but instead of trying to save the poor from the rich, you're saving the environment from the rich. It's just the same scam. And even Limbaugh was very skeptical in 2015 or 2014 or something when NASA first started talking about finding water on Mars. He was like, why is this even a story? And he said it's a story because it gives them an excuse to get a lot more money out of the taxpayers to do some pie in the sky project that'll probably never happen, but the people who got and spent the money won't care because by the time people start asking questions, they'll be out of office. He called out the scam a long time ago. This is a scam on many, many levels. So NASA Earth Science Division to be stripped of funding to shift focus away from home in favor of deep space exploration. Now, from the perspective of reality, from the perspective of those of us who prefer to live in it, it's not really a solution. You move away from one fake problem to another fake project. It's actually, in a way, it's kind of worse because this is how the Tide Pod reality works. You get both sides arguing over something instead of questioning if the thing is even real. In other words, false choices, false dichotomies. Is there really a difference here? Is this a distinction without a difference when you're talking about left and right? And I used to say that the hard left and the conservative right were totally different. But the problem is, as long as they're all bouncing off the same big lies, these differences are merely nominal. There is really no difference. Because you can be conservative and for small government, but if you still support the space program, well, you just threw your lot in with the sixth branch of the military, of an expansion of the government, more money going towards exploration of outer space, space junk removal, reclamation, however they're going to handle that. Like these are all things that are being done with the help of the taxpayer, with big government. This is big government planning. So you can't call yourself a social or a fiscal conservative. You can't call yourself a conservative anymore if you support the space program. Okay, Donald Trump is poised to eliminate all climate change research conducted by NASA as part of a crackdown on politicized science. Now, politicized science, fake science, is worse for humanity than fake news. We all recognize fake news. It wasn't a big surprise. It was like, oh, finally somebody's calling it. But I don't know. There've always been people calling it. The left calls out the bias of the right and vice versa, and the independent pretends like they're somehow above both when they're just as codependent on the CIA reality scripting as everybody else. It's all government controlled. Alternative media is grassroots. Independent media is codependent on the big networks because it still treats their stories as real. You're not independent if you're still treating government propaganda stories as reality and reporting on those. No, you're still feeding into the surreality. It really is that. There is a there's a parallel universe. The people who buy into the mainstream news media are like religious fundamentalists who live in a parallel universe. Doesn't matter what culture you're in. If you're surrounded by nothing but Mormons, you live in Mormonville, and you believe everything in that book, you go through all the rites, it's just part of your tradition and culture. Okay, well, you live in a certain bubble. And the people who buy into the big mainstream media lies of the day, the big lies of big fake science of the day, and everything else, you live in a bubble. No different than any other cultist. Because your reality has been augmented. And that's what we're talking about here anyway. This big discussion is about augmentations. Are you going to live your life according to what can be known and perceived? Or are you going to have it augmented by things that cannot be validated by your own senses or by anything, by evidence, but that you have to accept on faith? Are you going to augment your reality with a belief in the spinning ball model because you've been told and because it's been presented to you on screens? Or are you going to request more evidence? Are you willing to live without having all the answers right now, knowing that those answers aren't going to be immediately found? Like, if you're not, if you're going to reach for the nearest total explanation, well, you're going to be reaching for answers to things that require a leap of faith because those answers aren't available to us right now. Religions lie. It's a big lie. They promise you all the answers. The big lie of religion and even the big lie of big government is that they have all the answers and they can solve all the problems, and they can't. Scientology will sell you a bridge to total freedom. You spend your whole life on this thing, and what are they selling? They're selling a perfected view of reality that doesn't exist, like the communists. If everybody just gave up on their capitalism and threw it away in favor of this new system, everything would be fair. The communist utopia, workers' paradise. It's never happened. We're supposed to have like Jetsons by now on the moon, according to the Soviet space communism that they were pushing almost 100 years ago. Selling pies in the sky is what governments and religions have been doing from the beginning. They all do it. We have a better vision, but it requires you accepting our leaders, our priesthood, and then, of course, you're going to fund it. So what's your heaven going to be, sitting up in a cloud, looking down at your enemies burning in a lake of fire while you're entertained by 72 virgins and beardless servant boys giving you grapes? Or is it going to be the one where you play a harp all day in the clouds, praising the guy on the throne? Which paradise did you buy into? Because they're all lies. Is it the one where you're farming potatoes under a dome on Mars, representing the beginning of the next stage of mankind's evolution as a multiplanetary species? Like, which one of these heavens is yours? And what they do is they say, okay, well, here's the heaven that's accessible, but it's going to require this. And they're all Ponzi schemes. Heaven's a lie, space is a lie, paradise is a lie, utopias are lies. Utopia even means no place. And that's really what you're looking at here with big state planning, big government, big religion. They're all selling utopian schemes, paradises that they don't actually have access to. And worse, the dark side of this same template is they sell you on doomsdays that aren't going to come. 9/23/2017 came and went. Y2K came and went. 2012 came and went. How many times have these different doomsayers said, this is the generation where this is going to happen? Okay, so selling a utopian paradise is part of the same system of control, which is all about lie-based or fabricating people's realities, selling them on illusions. It's the same game as what the doomsayers do. So whether you're promising heaven or promising hell, you're playing the same game. End times prophecy, whether it be climate change or the sky is falling because the firmament's going to crack, they're the same scam. Look at this headline. This is just from yesterday. And this is because of Vice. And I knew that was a hit piece when I saw it. Anything coming out of Vice is meant to sink flat earth. It's meant to sink the idea. These people hate ideas. They hate thought experiments. They just want you to be lockstep, accept the ideas handed to you, accept the programming, regurgitate it on command. Don't stray. And if you do stray, do it in a really cliche way like Joe Rogan. Like talking about simulation theory and how things might be a simulation, like there's nothing there. There's no substance to their talks. They don't go into anything actually challenging. Like the idea that, well, what do these weirdos mean when they say that most dinosaurs are probably hoaxed, if not all? Like, why is that statement something that can't be analyzed by someone like Joe Rogan? All he can do is call you stupid for uttering it, and then he can mumble about something unoffensive and unchallenging like simulation theory, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. I mean, the fact is, if you're a blue pillar or even a Tide Podder, you're living in a simulation. You really are. Your reality's been augmented by so much garbage. Like you look up and you think that there's people in a can up there, a bunch of American astronauts drinking cosmonaut urine, waving, looking down at you, doing experiments in the sky. Like, no, they're not. That's a movie theater. It's a stage. It's a theatrical production. The International Space Station is a theatrical production. The burden of proof for it being up there has not been provided. And I've yet to see any International Space Station moon transit footage that looks like anything other than CGI. I've seen some videos where someone will purport to have found or recorded something going across the moon at the appointed time to the second that you could set your watch to it. And they'd put it up there saying, oh, I saw something. Don't know what it was. That wasn't the space station. There is no space station up there. So let's move on. Here's one thing I never thought I'd be writing, and now this is zmescience.com bouncing off Vice. The Flat Earth Society believes in climate change. See, this is one of the first things I pointed out. I said, the people who can see through the climate change hoax are going to be the first ones to recognize the bigger space hoax. And they're the ones we ought to reach out to. And anybody who has a skepticism about the globe ought to have skepticism about climate change, because the evidence presented to you for your globe is coming from the same people who give you the evidence for climate change. We're talking NOAA. We're talking NASA. So you're going to trust them about the weather, about climate change, about how they politicize the weather and use it to make the case that we must have a space program to escape? You're going to trust them on this, but then you don't trust them on the basic shape? That tells you that the Flat Earth Society is a NASA sock puppet. And so this is very interesting. I never heard about the Flat Earth Society because they're not very vocal. They're just the go-to group that the media references whenever something's going on having to do with this topic. And interestingly enough, it seems like every single person on YouTube talking about the flat earth question, the first thing they do is they say, don't trust the Flat Earth Society. They're controlled opposition. They all do it. And then they all call each other controlled opposition. And so then no one knows who to trust. And I find this interesting because it shouldn't be about who to trust or shepherds. It should be about the information. And so when you just objectively look at the information and you get past all the egos and the pissing contests, the YouTube politics, when you get past it, you do find that they're actually, all the people who are calling each other scams, calling each other this or that, they are all on the same team with regards to something crucial, and that is the model. We don't have enough information to have a model, whether it be globe, domed, or otherwise. Referencing ancient scriptures or ancient concepts of the world, these things do not count as evidence for positing an enclosed system. Anybody positing an enclosed system, I think, is doing the work of the controlled opposition. Doesn't matter if you're in the Flat Earth Society or not. There's a little bit of buffering. It's on Facebook. If it gets bad, don't worry about it. The replay on YouTube won't have it when I re-upload it. Just a couple more things. BBC admits they get climate change coverage wrong too often. He says you do not need a denier to balance the debate. So again, controlled debate. Controlled debate, both sides arguing over the information provided to them by the experts, none of them questioning whether the information itself is valid. They're just questioning on the interpretation. Like different denominations who have different interpretations of the same scripture, but they're still getting their information from the same Bible. And the mainstream media is the Bible of today. The mainstream media is the state church of the day. Okay, one other thing I kind of wanted to talk about here is this. This is something I put a blog post about this on the Infinite Plane Society WordPress. It has to do with something that's happening in Iran. People are organizing around burning obelisks. Burning obelisks. We're talking about they'll make a mock Washington monument, put some Mason symbols on it, throw a 666 and an American flag, and they'll torch it. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This is here we go. Why do Iranians set obelisks on fire? They recognize these as symbols of ancient Egypt.